today's global webinar. Um, my name is Anthony Yakilome Justice. I'm a Millennium Fellow from the University of Port, and I'm very happy to be moderating this session. We have a very distinguished guest with us today, in the person of Mr. Matt Patsky. So Matt Patsky is the CEO of Trillium Investment, and I'm going to make sure we have a very great time here today. And on that note, I'm going to open the floor to him to introduce himself. And welcome, Mr. Patsky.
Great. Thank you, Anthony, and welcome to all of you from around the world. I'm Matthew Patsky, and the CEO of Trillium Asset Management, and I'm going to talk to you today about creating positive change through active ownership in the public equity markets, and so describe what we mean by that and how you go about that. It's every time we spend money or we invest money, we're having impact on the planet. We're having different levels of impact in the world. The question we've got to always ask ourselves is what kind of impact, right? Is that impact positive or is it negative? Is it in alignment with the types of impact we're trying to have? And so as we look at trying to have positive impacts in the world, particularly in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, we want to sort of ask whether or not that alignment is there, and is it in alignment with our own social values? So I want to first thank MCN and the United Nations Academic Impact for launching the Millennium Fellowship. Also just want to thank you all for your commitment to lead with empathy, humility, and inclusion as guiding values. There is, we certainly have learned a lesson from the last 4 years of what's happened here in Washington. And my apologies to all of you for what's happened here in Washington. But we are aware that in order to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we need to act in concert with each other in a coordinated fashion. It requires us all to be rowing in the same direction. When we have a player in the global stage like the United States rowing against the Sustainable Development Goals, against the Paris Climate Accord, we obviously have to row that much harder. And certainly that is exactly what we've all been doing, right? We've all been working incredibly tirelessly to try to move forward toward the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Accord and a whole bunch of global agreements around common goals around addressing climate change and ending poverty and trying to avoid the impacts of climate change is having on forcing people to relocate, the massive migration we've seen caused by the problems of drought in regions around the world, and certainly increased problems from weather being incredibly, becoming more and more extreme because of climate change. So I'm going to turn it back now to Anthony to start opening up with questions, but I'm just going to we're gonna sort of try to dive in and talk a little bit about what we mean by active ownership, what we mean by ways of having impact. But I'll just start by saying one other line, which is Trillium. I should point out was founded in 1982 with the objective of meeting the financial goals of our clients while leveraging their capital for positive social and environmental impact and alignment with their values. And so I just sort of open it up with that as sort of the reason Trillium Asset Management exists, why it was created, and what its goal is. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Anthony to moderate this talk. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have actually been listening to you and say a little bit about Trillium, and I think it's really interesting what you're doing with Trillium, and you also contribute to climate action and also contribute to the social impact space. I think that's really admirable. Now, I know that throughout your career, you've been able to you've been working with investment research and investment management, and you've also still had time to contribute to climate action, the social impact space. So What should you say is the role of social and responsible investing in driving social and policy change?
So, as I referenced in the opening, we know that every dollar invested is having impact, right? And the impact clearly for most is not even calculated. They don't even think about it. So the majority of investment dollars around the world is actually invested in ways in which there's a disconnect between the investor and the impacts they're having, and almost I would say a cavalier disregard for those impacts. Now, that is helped by the disintermediation of money, right? You put the money somewhere and you don't know where it's going and you don't know what it's supporting, and so there's a tendency not to pay attention to the impacts. And what we're trying to do with socially responsible investing, impact investing, and ESG integrated investing, and all the different language people are now throwing at it, is to try to break that down and say, you need to, and you should, right? If you have a retirement account, if you have, if your family has money invested, it's up to you to ask the questions, right? Go ahead and ask how is it invested? What are the impacts it's having? But the opportunity is there to actually change number one, change how it's invested so that it's invested in companies that are having positive impact, but also to change the behavior of those companies by asking for changes in behavior, improved behavior from those companies that you're investing in. And so socially responsible investing is really about trying to take a holistic approach to how you're investing money and trying to make sure that the impacts you're having are positive in terms of social and environmental outcomes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was really insightful. Are you able to break it down for us? I think for many of us who might be on this cohort now, I think it's the first time we've actually heard about social and social responsible investing. So I think that's really good. Now, you've also made mention of the fact that you've actually done something like this previously. So your history shows that you actually been involved in the area of research for social development, and it's really incredible what you're doing there. So how is research essential for creating change, and how can young leaders engage in research to ensuring that they scale their positive impact in their communities?
So ensuring that we have positive impact is, I'm sorry, I'm actually also noticing that we have lots of people still in the waiting room. So I'm, apologies, but I'm not sure who else is able, but I keep seeing people pop up in the waiting room.
Yeah,
so
let's
just
don't worry about
make sure. No, good. So you'll keep letting them in. I was like juggling. I'm like, oh, and I'm going to presume that it's okay just for everybody, that because I'm seeing that there is a lot of chats, and I'm going to presume that you're not expecting me to read the chats while I'm speaking, so that if you have questions for me, let's ask them, because I'm sitting there watching tons of chats go by, and I'm like, I can't necessarily catch anything on the chat. So hopefully that's for, I was going to say, Anthony, hopefully you're paying attention. So, trying to, there's the question of impact, and then also trying to look at how we measure impact is an interesting one, because there isn't an easy way to measure impact. And part of, let's just sort of step back. What are the standards we set to begin with? What are the standards we set with to begin with to talk about what it means to be investing in companies that are having positive impact? That is all very, right now, there isn't really a lot of defined characteristics of ways we measure and ways of putting quantifying those impacts. So this is an awful lot of subjective, having people just sort of dig in and look. And what's problematic with what we are hopeful for is just simply more continuity of the way in which we measure. And of course, you probably know there are stock exchanges around the globe that are working on trying to set standards and require more disclosure on environmental, social issues, and more standardization of what we mean when we're looking for measuring governance. And so I think we're moving in the direction of standardization. But for when you go back and try to say, well, how do we measure impact? We end up doing it really on an incident by, on an anecdotal basis by incident. So we'll look at, and I'm just going to give you one of the big sort of impacts we had recently that is not even in a name of a stock we own. Well, I shouldn't say that. One of the stocks we own ended up being incredibly helpful. But you may know that there is a problem with racial justice globally, and that the problem is very severe in the United States. And we had a problem of a Washington football team and American football team that was named after an incredibly racist term for Native Americans. I won't mention the name, but it was one that was actually coined by the United States government in its scheme to actually set up a payment system for killing Native Americans. So you brought in a Native American. This was the term they used when you turned the Native American scalp in. So that was that's kind of how bad the whole language goes back in history on. And so we worked with the Oneida tribe of Wisconsin to start to lobby American businesses to not participate in supporting this football team and try to get the name changed. It ended up finally, the trigger was PepsiCo announced they would no longer advertise in any broadcast as long as they kept that name. And that's obviously a very big advertiser on professional sporting events in the US. And in addition, we had, and this was even, I think, more meaningful, was Nike, who had the license for the production of all of the logo apparel and hats for the NFL. Announced, National Football League announced that they would no longer produce anything with this team logo, and that they were taking it off their website. And within 2 hours, it was gone. It was off the website. FedEx, which had the stadium naming rights, actually announced that based on the economic hit that this was going to have on the team, that they were immediately calling on the team to change their name. And I tell you that just because it was like, really, it was pressure from corporate America that changed and then corrected this situation. Now it may seem fairly minor, but it's actually a big deal in terms of getting the recognition of, there shouldn't be racist terms being used for a football team naming or for, the naming of products. And of course, you've seen some movement that has happened since then of some, basically products announcing name changes that were also considered incredibly racist from products that have been around in the US. So I just give you that as one sort of a success point of demonstrating impact. What we're trying to do is constantly push. Certainly there are plenty of examples of more modest changes in behavior where we can talk about a corporate behavior change, but that was one that was a fairly big recent win. And I have to tell you, the campaign was 25 years in the making. So I just want you to think about, sometimes we need to work in coalition, and sometimes it takes a long time to win. So
I think that's really good. The fact that it seems people can actually make a positive impact in their community while also still contributing to social impact makes a lot of sense. So you've been in the private sector for a very long time. You said since 1984, you've been in the private sector, and you've also continually had time to actually contribute to the social impact space. So what advice would you give to fellows who are willing to also go into the private sector, but also contribute to social impact work as well?
Sure. The opportunity for all of you to have impact exists everywhere. And one of the things, it could be in government, it could be in the private sector, right? And one of the things I think we oftentimes lose sight of as we're looking at career opportunities is figure out what really drives you and what you're passionate about, and make it work no matter where you land. Because when I first was preparing to enter the workforce in 1984, my hope was to work in economic development. And I wanted to work in the field of trying to alleviate poverty. That was my objective. And I couldn't find a job. I was trying to get a job in Washington, and I couldn't find a job in Washington because Ronald Reagan had become president, and he had decided that there was no role for government in trying to eliminate poverty. And laissez-faire economics was the rule of the day, and we were in the process of dismantling much of what had been put in place over 40 years to try to address poverty in the United States. So I ended up finding a job on Wall Street. I was working at Lehman Brothers, and I was a technology analyst. But I took the opportunity to sort of think about what mattered to me and what values I held, and started looking at incorporating environmental and social impact into my investment process. So I was literally publishing pieces in the 80s talking about the environmental and social impact of businesses, and getting ridiculed by a significant number of people, I will tell you, but also had the support of what I would say was about 5%. So 5% of people would tell me, this is incredible. This is an incredible way to look at it. That's unbelievable that you've been so thoughtful about the way in which people treat human capital and the way in which they train and retain, the way they build a model that helps them retain people and build loyalty with customers. And so there were supporters. I will tell you, my immediate supervisor literally told me that it was, I'll quote him. He just said, "Matt, really nice that you care about these issues. If you don't stop, it'll destroy your career." So I sit here today as the CEO of one of the first and largest impact investing firms, globally, really, over 4 billion now. And I have to tell you, it didn't really hurt my career. And so following your passion is really important. And if you end up that you're working at, and you pick the company, you end up working at a bank, you end up working at a big multinational, you end up working at an energy, an electric utility. It's like the opportunity to pursue your dreams and the opportunity for you to press for change within that organization exists, and it exists everywhere. Now, I'm not going to tell you it can't be tough and that you might not have a boss who tells you it's going to destroy your career if you keep pushing this. But I'm telling you, it takes internal advocates for change to occur. And one of the proudest things that we do as activist investors, as being active owners, is we are often at the table helping empower the internal employees who are advocating or agitating for change, right? And so I can go through and give some examples of that, but I just, we're there as from the outside, right? You've reached out to, hopefully, certainly there's no inside information or anything like that, but it's like you've reached out and you've let us know that you're working on a project to improve reduce the CO2 emissions from this particular project. Having an investor call in and say, we really care about reducing the CO2 emissions from that facility right at the same time that you as a project manager just suggested it, happens to work really well for, coincidentally, them saying, oh my God, there's outside requests for this. We better take them very seriously. And, this was, Megan's idea, but we need to really start to push forward because, ultimately this is, we're getting now this pressure from the outside, right? So that's the magic of sort of what I would call coalition, but without necessarily, it's a collaborative effort to try to get significant changes in behavior. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that it was really exhaustive. The answer you gave to that was really exhaustive. So considering the fact that investors normally need incentives to contribute to social impact space, and given the fact that a lot of them view this social impact space through the lens of the EA.
Okay. All right, is Anthony freezing? Okay, so he's going to ask about through the lens of ESG. because, and I could just tell because he said E. But so it is true, an awful lot of what we're seeing. Oh, sorry, Anthony, are you back? All right. Well, Anthony, I'm going to answer the question I think you're going to ask and keep going. But so what we've seen is the mainstreaming of environmental social governance investing, ESG investing. And so we're seeing an awful lot of people say, all right, maybe you're right. Maybe these environmental, social, and governance issues really do matter, and maybe they are material. Now, of course they're material, and they've been material forever. What we're getting at is trying to get better and better standards for trying to get that data to be relevant. Now, it's always, in the case of, I shouldn't say always, in the case of the data sets right now, the environmental, social, and governance data is backward looking. And so what you're seeing is that people are collecting this data from publicly available documents, and then they're writing them up, and they're creating a score for ranking, Costco or big box retailer here in the U.S. And so welcome back, Anthony. You are muted right now, but when I finish, we'll unmute you. Or you can, I should say, you can unmute yourself. There you are. Okay, good. So welcome back. So the ESG, pardon? I'm answering your ESG question, but so I'm answering your ESG question, and I'll let you jump in with another question in a second. But what we've seen now is there's an acknowledgement of, because we've been arguing since 1982, Trillium's been arguing this data is material. It's material for the quality of management, for how they're dealing with recruiting, training employees, how they're dealing with the communities they operate in. All of this is relevant, and it's really important data. Now we're seeing the adoption of, in a very mainstream way. And again, this came out of Project of the United Nations, which was the Principles for Responsible Investing. And for those who don't know the UNPRI, the PRI now has as signatories more than half of the investable assets around the globe, right? And as part of your commitment to the Principles for Responsible Investing, you are required to ask your managers, any asset manager you're using, how they are incorporating environmental, social, and governance data into the investment process. So a lot of what you're seeing is pressure that was, and so when people start to think about leverage points, think about the leverage that had. The United Nations decided they were going to try to organize around the principles that environmental, social, and governance data mattered. And in the period of about 10 years, got almost half of all investable assets to sign up, and now it's over half. And now there's a requirement that you send a report in, and then you tell them what you're doing to ask. And so there's every single asset manager around the globe is being asked, how are you integrating environmental, social, and governance principles into the investment process? So it's created an incredible level of momentum, right? And so we're seeing that sort of accelerating. And now what we want to ask is it authentic? Are they really doing it? How are they doing it? And that's where a lot of the questions now are coming in that we're seeing. And so yeah. So I'm sorry, Anthony, but what we're trying to do is work on like what's next. So, Anthony, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was actually listening to your question and your answer to the question. So it really makes a lot of sense for me, because I actually had a follow-up question to this, but I think I will ask the question that Suno asked in the group and the chat box. So did you want to give up during difficult times of your career? And if so, how did you overcome it? Also, was it always your passion of incorporating environmental and social innovation into your career, or you came about this idea later?
Okay, so I'm going to I will confess to being an odd child, and tell you that by the time I was 11, I was donating allowance, and I don't know why, but I remember doing it, so I'm just going to share. I was donating to the National Wildlife Federation. My allowance was 25 cents, and every other week I would put in an envelope a quarter taped to taped inside an envelope and mail it to the National Wildlife Federation. The thing that I remember being ironic is I think it was 8 cents for the stamp. So I just keep thinking that was a high cost to get them that quarter, but they got that quarter every other week. And so there was I think a deep appreciation for why it mattered from a very young age. And I did not get that from my mother and father. So that's not where it came from. It wasn't because I was living with hippie environmentalists from the 60s. I was not. And so it was indeed part of my DNA that I was going to graduate from college and I was going to save the world. And I can't tell you why. And are you frustrated at times? Oh my God, are you frustrated at times, right? I mean, you don't know. I mean, the breakdowns I had after Trump's election. I mean, I was like, oh my God, 30 plus years of work, and he's literally dedicated he's dedicating himself to destroy everything I worked on, right? That's a little hard, and you're thinking that, and that's a pretty powerful position, right? For someone to come in and say, I'm going to dismantle everything you've ever worked on. But you've got to work it through. And there's times where you're just simply like, you're hitting a wall and you're realizing I can't move forward in the organization I'm in, and I've got to move on and find that next job, right? And so I've had that happen a couple times where it's just like, all right, this isn't going to work and I can't move forward from where I am. I've gotten as much as I can, at Lehman Brothers, and they're letting me do as much as they will, but that next leap requires that I move on. And so I'm going to move on. And you got to believe in yourself and just simply take that leap. I mean, I wrote a business plan about how environmental social governance mattered and what it would mean for what it should mean to investors. And I went knocking on tons of doors until someone finally said, well, I'll let you do that, right? And it was like, and it took 2.5 years, but the good news is no one was throwing me out of Lehman. I was trying to find my way out of Lehman. And I found my way out of Lehman long before they tried to destroy the entire financial system, I might add. So I found my way out of Lehman in '93, and they tried to cause the collapse of the global economy in 2008. So 15 years. Anyway, I had nothing to do with that part of it, but anyway. So Anthony is frozen again.
I do think, I think he's going to come back. I thank you so much. That's it's incredible. And I see a couple of questions here in the chat, so I want to invite some of the fellows to hop on and introduce themselves and maybe ask their questions. And so I see a question from Andrew. Andrew, do you want to ask your question? If you want to introduce yourself first, please. And
if you all could, if you can tell me where you're from, that would be really nice to hear also when you're asking your question.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Matt. My name's Andrew, and I'm from Bentley University, pretty close, right outside.
Very close.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're not related to Jeffrey Hollander, right?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay. Just curious because he's an old friend. So anyway.
Yeah, so I'm actually working right now. I'm volunteering with a group that's trying to poke holes at ESG and trying to, like, I don't know how much you're familiar with like regeneration, the regenerative economy, that kind of concept. But I'm just wondering, like, do you think, as someone that's like really deep in the ESG space, that ESG falls short on like sustaining and regenerating our natural ecosystem?
Yes, is the short answer. But what you have is, you have to remember the data sets are not particularly accurate right now, and they're also not forward looking. And so one of the things that, if you want ESG data to have value, Andrew, the real way to have value is to have active dialogue with the company in order to be able to project where they're headed, not just where they've been. and then you can start to talk about regenerative, the idea of a regenerative ecosystem and how that would play into what needs to be there. But the way it's being used now is an awful lot of people are just simply buying that data set, slapping it on, and it's really doing very little. I would argue this for you, which is let's not let let's not discourage people who are making some progress along their path, because if people have moved from on a scale of 100 have moved from 0 to 5, let's at least applaud that they moved to 5. And so the fact that a whole bunch of traditional managers, including BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, have decided that environmental, social, and data may matter, and therefore they have a piece of their business where they're looking at it, is progress. It's nowhere near where we need them. And quite frankly, if we don't move them from a 5 to a 20 to a 30, keep moving them toward understanding exactly what you just said, which is that we have to look at it needing to be regenerative. We have to look at sustainability has to be encompassing, sort of the whole picture of what we've created here, and we have to look at it with all of the elements of looking at the economy overall. It can't be, all right, I found the perfect company. I have to find companies that are fitting into an ecosystem that are helping with a regenerative economy and being able to create true sustainability. So part of our culture is, of course, part of the problem, right? Growth and consumption. And, the way I measure success is whether or not I have as much as my neighbor, and that has to, our framing all needs to change. But it is true that the ESG alone right now is wholly inadequate and is not the solution. It's just simply directionally, like I say, I applaud that we're moving in the right direction, because we're starting to at least understand that collecting the data is important. And and I think what we're going to see is, you're at Bentley, that we have forecasts for, every company. People are forecasting their revenues and their earnings, and they're giving us a forward-looking 5-year, right, for every company that's publicly traded. I believe we will get there where we're looking at a 5-year forecast for ESG profile based on people assessing companies and where they're headed, and that part of that benefit we're going to get from the PRI ultimately is that we'll have a lot more effort to try to think about the true sustainability of business models and what changes they're making.
Okay, Andrew, I hope that answer was sufficient enough for you. Matt, as kind of a follow-up question, I was reading an article, I think a while back, back in October, that okay, somebody has a question. Jasmine Mbale, please unmute yourself and then raise your hand. And then introduce yourself, your name, your university, and where you're calling from.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Bale from Strathmore University. I'm living in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a business student in Strathmore University. And my question to you, Matt, is, as a business student, there's a very thin line between impact investing and philanthropic investing. What would you define that thin line to be between impact investing and philanthropic investing? Yes.
So,
Thank you.
thank you, Jasmine. Capital is on a spectrum, and we've seen some good work done by this from a number of foundations. But philanthropic capital, you have philanthropic capital, which expects no return, and market rate capital, and in between, there's plenty of capital that may seek or be willing to accept a less than market rate return in order to have positive impact. In the world of impact investing, and this is one of the tensions we see, is the question of does it require to be a sacrifice in return in order to have positive impact? And the answer, of course, is no. I can show you plenty of work we've done and plenty of projects where there's been market rate return and incredibly positive social and environmental impact. So the possibility of creating a portfolio for somebody who perhaps is a endowment and their needs are they need to earn market rate returns for their program, you could design a perfectly aligned portfolio that was working toward their mission, that was highly impactful across all asset classes. So I don't think it should be the debate it is. Now the question we get back to us is, well, aren't there investment opportunities that require a sacrifice in return? And are there not, opportunities to have impact that obviously involve potentially no return, right? And the answer is of course. And there's plenty of examples of where philanthropic capital is required. And there's plenty of examples of where a willingness to accept a lower than market rate return is going to end up helping and be more impactful. And so I use this example when I'm talking to the endowment world, when they'll ask that question is, if I can successfully lend money to a loan fund in South Africa at 8%, and they are going to be able to have wonderful impact, will they be able to have potentially more impact if I lent it to them at 4%? Well, probably, because they're going to probably have more revenue in order to lend to more people. And in addition, if I were lending it to them with zero, right? If I gave them a zero interest loan, it's going to be even more impactful. So you can sort of see how your expectations and dialing up or dialing down the return can actually dial up the impact you're having. Absolutely. So we end up addressing it from a very different context, which is every time we sit down with an institution or a high net worth, a family or an individual, we start with the question of what are your needs? What do you need to earn off of this portfolio? And then we go back to designing it based on matching what they're trying to accomplish in terms of social and environmental impact. And so we could end up with a portfolio, and often do, that's below market because they can afford to accept below market. And we've made decisions very consciously about trying to be more catalytic in a specific way. So the loan to the effort locally to bring back local sustainable agriculture to a region is, maybe below market. And that's okay if you can afford to take below market. So, we want to sort of stop having this debate about whether impact investing is market rate or not. The truth is it can be across the spectrum, because there are a lot of really great business ideas that are high impact that are going to have great financial returns.
Okay, thank you very much. Jasmine, I hope he answered the question. Okay. So hopefully he did. So I'm going to call on Victi Mentor. I think she had a question a while back, but she wasn't able to. So Victi, please raise up your hand and then ask a question. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Matt. You already kind of answered my question about kind of balancing the investment strategies you use to make sure that that impact is happening. And one of my other questions was what sorts of institutions and clients does Trillium Asset Management invest for? So is it companies, financial institutions, or individuals? And like, what are like your main customer base for the company?
Sure. So our client base includes religious institutions, endowments, foundations, a lot of environmental groups. So, an organization you would know is Sierra Club. Just, we obviously are, because of confidentiality reasons, don't go and talk about most of our clients. Most of our clients are individuals and families. But we have a lot of, religious groups from and across the spectrum, which is always wonderful to look at. We've got from doing Sharia compliant portfolios to Catholic compliant portfolios to I think the largest denomination I think we manage money for is the Unitarians.
Okay. So hopefully, Vicky, I hope you answered the question.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for asking. So somebody raised his hand, Abdulrazak, I think.
All right. I'm Abdulrazak Habibullah from Ahmadu Bello University, Nigeria. Thanks so much for the session, guys. My question is, what do you think companies' policy on corporate social responsibility will be in the next few years, given that companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, are set to advance their business model and transform our world?
Yeah. I would expect that we continue to move toward there being just more robust disclosure and more robust efforts to deal with broader environmental social issues. And so just as an example, and of course you're seeing this very actively in the United States, and I think you know, the efforts of companies to try to improve upon diversity and inclusion is at a, you know, at an effort and pace that I've never seen before. And you know, it's like recognizing how serious the problem was is obviously the first step, but trying to address it is what I'm seeing in terms of much more robust efforts. And so, you know, certainly, you know, we have a long way to go, but I think there's a lot of effort to try to improve overall on their programs on addressing, you know, the broad issues of corporate social responsibility and trying to make sure they're doing better on transparency and disclosure. So I think you're going to continue to see that movement. Now, that was under threat because of what was happening under the reign of terror of Donald Trump, and I can't, you know, it was particularly with I don't know if people were watching the real detail, but within the SEC and within the Labor Department, there was really a very focused effort, and you know, who was behind it? I don't know that we'll ever really know, but it was certainly the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce had their hands in it of trying to limit disclosure and trying to limit the ability of shareholders to act as, you know, to influence corporate behavior. And they, in the most recent efforts, were trying to basically characterize ESG investing as dangerous to returns and therefore trying to declare that it was not possible to be a good fiduciary and invest in ESG strategies with retirement assets, right? If you saw the Department of Labor letter. And while that, you know, for those of us just the facts, it's not true. It actually has demonstrated reduced volatility and better returns. So I'm you know, I think we'll see that a lot of the momentum we had will start to accelerate as we move beyond this unfortunate Trump era.
Great, thank you very much, Mac. Anthony's going to hop back in hopefully in a couple of minutes. I see a question from Chloe. Chloe, if you don't mind, I'm going to unmute you if you want to introduce yourself, please. Name, university, country, and ask your question.
Hello, I'm Chloe.
Hi.
And I'm the campus director at the University of Pittsburgh working on climate action. And my question was simple and short. I was basically wondering what was your
Chloe,
opinion.
where is your university?
Oh, University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
My bad. In USA, in Pennsylvania. My question was, what's your opinion on companies, particularly in the Fortune 500, going carbon neutral? I know like different people, environmental fields say it's enough. Some people say it's not enough. I was wondering your opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the efforts to go carbon neutral is certainly trying to reduce their CO2 emissions, trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but then purchasing offsets. And so we get into that debate of, is purchasing offsets really acceptable as a way of getting carbon neutral? And I step back and say, well, that's how we do it at Trillium, right? We have some carbon footprint because we actually commute to work. Well, not now, but we were commuting to work. Even if we were commuting via mass transit, we still had a carbon footprint from our travel, from our commute, and then from our office space. And while it's modest, so I would just say, I think we got to applaud every effort right now, and we certainly hope we're getting to the point where you actually are getting to more and more of the energy supply coming from carbon neutral sources, so that we're getting to, and that's a lot of what we're trying to support with the investment dollars is, let's try to get to the point. Why don't we have more coming from renewables? We don't have more coming from renewables, not because of cost, but because of storage. And so we need better storage capacity, and we need the ability to be able to make sure that there's more consistency for the grid from renewable sources, right? And we know that that's a part of it. But I'm not, I addressed it earlier. I think we can't let perfect to the enemy of the good. We've got to applaud that people are trying to move in the right direction. And so we've been advocating that every company push for supplying 100% of their energy needs from renewables. And that demand creates the utility saying, well, we need more supply of renewables. And less supply, less supply from fracking in Pennsylvania. But anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Personally, I think the fact that given this line, I think what Schneider Electric is doing concerning clean energy is really also very admirable. So I think it's really good. So I hope Mr. Matt answered the question. So we have another question from two other people. I think because of time, we do have just these two people ask their questions, and then we just round up with all the questions we have. So Ayire Joshua, please unmute yourself and then tell us where you're coming from and then your name.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Ayere Joshua, and I'm a student at GLU University, Uganda, but I'm a Nigerian. So my question is, most of the companies that are located in the southern part of my country, they always in the oil producing companies, but most times their social impacts are not felt by the community. Most times we have the gas emission and other things. So I am asking, what is your opinion? How do we get those companies to really create impact that really affects the community where they are on? And sometimes on the paper, you see so many but they don't really do what what is your opinion on getting those companies to really create a social impact?
Right. Part of that is pressure from the investor community, but an awful lot of that also has to be from internal employees. And I referenced that earlier. We have to step back and remember that these companies are staffed by people. The people have varying levels of interest. Some of them none at all, and some incredibly interested in trying to create a better world. And we need more young people in those companies pushing for better outcomes, pushing for them to consider the impact. We need more of a framework from the global government on implementing the Paris Accord, which then should put pressure on the Nigerian government to make sure they're in accordance with the Paris Accord, working on reducing carbon emissions, which then leaves them putting pressure on the companies to reduce emissions. But it also is going to take honest, decent people in the company working and pushing in that same direction. And it's why there's certainly, I know from the interactions I've had that there are good people in, almost every company. that are trying to do the right thing. And so wherever you end up in your career, just realize there's opportunity to create change, right, and push. But it is you know, it takes a coordinated effort. I can't tell you that I know the Nigerian companies and that I have any you know, solutions specific for any specific company. But there's, you know, there is you know, we're trying to do it from a macro, from policy side, which starts at the UN and works its way down to, you know, by country level. In the US, of course, we have an awful lot that's by state level, and that's been our only path in the last 4 years. So, but that's kind of, I guess, what I'd suggest as an answer, which I'm not sure I really gave you a full answer, but that's from my knowledge, because I would have to know a lot more about the individual companies.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Matt. Joshua, I hope you answered the question. I actually have some questions myself to ask, but because of time, I think we're going to wrap it up here. So I think, Matt, for those who want to connect with you, can you just drop your social media handles or your contact in the chat box so they can reach out to you? And then if you have any other parting
my social media handles. Wow, that's. Yeah. I hope I can remember some of them. Hold on, I have everyone. Okay, I think my Twitter handle is really tricky. I think my Twitter handle is Matt, capital M, Patsky, capital P. But I don't know if there's a pound in front of that. I don't even remember how it works. Oh, Sam is already sending it. Sam's looking this all up. So, all right, and yeah, and I also have a very tricky LinkedIn. I think I'm Matthew Patsky. And then I have a really tricky Facebook. I think it's Matthew Patsky. And then, and by the way, I also should tell you, I'm the only Matthew Patsky on Facebook. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got the wrong one. No, there is no wrong one. It's only me. So that's the beauty of them having changed my family's name entering Ellis Island, is it doesn't match anything. So it's the name comes from Eastern Europe. All right. So yeah, thank you all, and do feel free to reach out. I'd be honored to talk to each and every one of you, just not at the same time. No. Okay. All right. Take care.
You can hand over to Noha right now, so she runs up everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. If I mean, we're 2 minutes away, but I just want to say, if you have any closing remarks, any final advice you'd have for the fellows as we wrap up. I think your work has been really incredible, and learning about your activism and climate change is truly inspiring, and especially for those who are now working on projects, whether it's small or large, on environmental sustainability and climate change. So yeah, any final words that you'd love to share? Otherwise, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my only final words to you all is just simply make sure you're pursuing your passion, and the mistake so many make is pursuing money, and it's a recipe for being, you know, constantly running hard and getting nowhere. So, you know, think about what really motivates you and what will make you happy, and pursue that. And you know, I think that's the one piece of advice I like to give young people, is just simply focus on how you're going to end up, you know, at a place where you're pleased. You know, I just saw a post the other day that said, imagine if you were doing your job so terribly that when you lost your job, the entire world celebrated. And I was like, yeah, that just happened to someone, you know? It's like the whole world burst out into celebration because someone was doing such a terrible job that, you know, so let's all just pursue our passion and pursue doing a good job and an effective job in making this world a better place. So thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. So yeah, so if there's one thing you can leave with, it's, you know, pursue your passion and carry that with you, despite how many people believe in the work that you do to start with. You can get to a lot of places. Thank you once again, Matt, and thank you to all of the fellows that attended. Anthony, if you have any also final words, but other than that, I thank you all.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you very much, Matt, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you all. All right.
All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.